news a bit like Sky News, or it appears to be news like in its presentation, so people sitting in a way that's recognisably like news, it's legitimised in a way that's recognisable as news. We think that that's up to the government to set more direct boundaries around that. If it appears as news like or market itself as news, it has to adhere to particular standards that are set up in the info slide, right? It has to be unbiased as reasonably as it possibly can. No, thank you. Okay.
Would this include news operations that are not funded by taxpayer money, like BBC?
Yes, it would. It includes all news corporations, even private ones. So, we think that, we'll talk a bit more about this later, but we think opinion will still exist because it is, in the internet age, people can like blog and talk on the internet and, on other columns and things like that, as long as they're not marketed in news publications or news formats, right? It's really impossible to crack out every kind of, every kind of thing, right? We think that we'll have an independent monitoring body and harsh enforcement carried out by this independent monitoring body with very high penalties like seizure of property or big fines to curb any kind of like infractions. So principally, I think that the government should take active responses to ensure that misinformation is not legitimised and that a bedrock of trustworthy news journalism exists. Because, firstly, it is essential for the functioning of democracy, which we think the government has a responsibility to uphold and promote. Secondly, we think that being passive constitutes taking the side of misinformation in the status quo because of the proliferation of misinformation in the internet age. We'll talk more about this later. Why we think that this will be the most unbiased news on that principle, even if you don't believe any of it. In fact, we think that it's the government's responsibility to try, so we think that they have a principal obligation to do so, even if you don't believe anything else we say. Next, why this will be the most unbiased source of news. We can see that it will never be totally unbiased. Individuals all have their certain biases, the certain like societal opinions and standards that exist will be carried out through that news, right? But we think that this restricts blatant bias of the kind that you see, which is far, far away from the sort of individual bias that people may have when they're trying to be unbiased. So the kind of bias that you have in like Fox News, which leans into bias heavily in order to market their news, will not exist because news outlets and reporters will now have an incentive to act in the way that they seek to be the least biased, and news outlets will have are able to achieve this because they have the structures and oversight to be unbiased and enforce that among their individuals the way that they see best in order to avoid penalties. But in the status quo, they choose not to exercise these kind of oversight mechanisms because they have a profit incentive to land into those opinionated news sources. Now, to understand more why it's good democracy. Firstly, three points under this. Firstly, democracy requires a basic level of information in order to function correctly. Individuals need to be able to make an informed choice in their governance, and to do so you need clear and unbiased information to vote or to demonstrate in any other political way, essentially to exercise your political rights, right? And so you need to understand, in accordance with your actual preferences, what those preferences are, firstly, so not have those preferences fed to you through some kind of other news source. Secondly, to understand the mechanics and basic outcomes of policy in like a layman's terms of what are being proposed to you by current political leaders, right? So what this means is that, in order to actually exercise the right for political engagement, you need to have an unbiased news source. So we think that having the very basic tools and mechanisms that are set out to you is essential to the function that democracy and the government has a responsibility to uphold that. Secondly, why this limits the impact of media moguls. So in the status quo, the Murdoch press, for example, and very large media conglomerates that have gained a lot of monopoly power, are able to dominate their news sources, and in the status quo, it's not regulated, their bias is not regulated. They're able to dominate the political message as well in order to prop up their rich moguls and donors and things like that. So this, for example, looks like the Murdoch press, which owns Fox News, Sky, and lots of print media in many countries, particularly across the world, right? So we think that this actor has an active and aggressive role in shaping, firstly, individuals' preferences, as I explained before, and secondly, what information actually exists, what stories are highlighted, how they are framed, how individuals discuss them, and all that discourse, right? The amount of power that these moguls have is not to be underestimated, right? Like, they are able to shape the voting public in very many countries. This is evident in the correlation between the density of Murdoch press in the Western world and the extent to which conservative governments have been elected in recent years, right? New Zealand has a very low concentration of Murdoch press and has had a left-wing coalition for a long time compared to Australia, which has, very distinct from what we're talking about here, right? Because it exists in very limited cases where an individual, some individual is being slandered. We don't think that in the course of political discourse, we're saying that Hillary's a liar, Hillary's this, Hillary's that, she's, like her emails are being published and there's all this bullshit. That's is a very far cry from what we're talking about here, right? So, thirdly, and importantly, why this improves faith in news and then more faith in the process of democracy and the state itself. The status quo, the proliferation of fake news and biased news with very strongly opinionated slant being passed off as fact and information means that there's a continued trend upwards in distrust in news. So, what this looks like is public trust in news reduces because there's a propensity to believe misinformation, which is put out into the world, but there's a symmetrical propensity to discredit real information because of the knowledge of fake information, right? Thirdly, it means that there's disengagement of the public with, because of that uncertainty that exists in what you can believe. This is bad for democracy and bad for individuals. So what the solution is here, strong enforcement of laws signals to individuals that they should trust these news institutions, they should engage with them, and they should understand that what they have to say is true.
The stance of the opening opposition is very clear. We are going to take this up where we support the diverse views in our political milieu. We believe that it is very important in order for us to run democracy, and we believe that it is the very ideal form of our democracy. 2 points of argumentation by opening opposition. Number one, in terms of the freedom of expression, why this is why the current news, the current condition of news medium is the right platform for the discriminated people to speak up. And number two, why under the Staff House there will be monopoly of big news corporation. But before that, let me engage to the case brought by the opening government. Firstly, basically their case talking about how this is going to run democracy, how this is going to lessen the bias of the people, the bias preferences of the people. Okay, several engagement towards the side of the opening government. Number one, we don't think that we don't think that under this there is clear harm. Why necessarily this leading news corporation is bad, right? We don't think that they give you they give you a tangible impact, a tangible harm. Why certain news model is bad. But number two, we believe that with the diverse news not later on, we believe that the diverse political view represented by news media is actually good. Why? Because it creates counter clarification for each political side. We see on the U.S. election, for example, the moment when there is hoax created by VOX, by Republican or by Democrat, for example, each of the side give counter clarification. If the opening government worries so much about people preferences on political side, on political view, we say that this counter clarification is very necessary, is very needed in order for people to clarify hoax news, for example, in order for people to clarify a bad news that is circling around the political issue. That's why under the National House we need this diverse political view of news in order to give counter clarification, and in order for to change the people preferences. But number three, we believe that the moment when you say that there is a certain political party dominating in certain country. How, for example, the right wing is chosen, for example, in particular country. We believe that this is already reflective towards what society needed, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that the moment, for example, Trump can win in previous US election, this is because the US people, for example, need Trump's policy in order for them to look for job vacancy and so on and so forth. Under their Second House, there will be no clear parameter, or there will be no clear explanation on what society actually needs. But under our Second House, it is going to be we believe that it is going to be reflected towards what society need the most. That's why we believe that under OO, it's going to be better with this diverse political view in this. Before I move on, OG.
Do you think that individuals in the Rust Belt would have voted for Trump to repeal their Medicare rights if they had not been listening to Fox News?
Yeah, we think that in order for you to construct such individual reference, to create such individual reference, we believe that we have to have this kind of diverse political views in order for you to still discriminate information. Okay, moving on to my first argumentation, why the freedom of expression is good under outside of the house. We believe that with the existence of this diverse political views of news, we say that this is going to be a platform for discriminated people to speak up. For example, how the left media can give representation towards women, for example, towards immigrants, for example, in order for them to say their story, to say the disadvantages or racist policies that disadvantage them, disadvantage them, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that only, for example, the left-leaning media that want to report this discriminated people and make their story be listened by a lot of people, ladies and gentlemen. But we say under the set of the house, the moment when those news are all obliged to be impartial, it's going to be those discriminated people will not be covered in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because the moment not thank you, they are taking side of these people. It will be labeled that this news platform is taking side on controversial issues, for example. Meanwhile, the discrimination or the racism that is created towards women, towards immigrants, for example, is very needed to be reported to the people in order for them to change the policy in the government, to decrease the racism, for example, in certain country. That's why we say that we still need this diverse news media in order for us to still have a side to this discriminated people. Moving on to my second argumentation, how this is going to create even worse monopoly on big news corporation. We believe that the moment when we make this kind of news become homogeneous, all news are reporting the same news, the same impartial news. We believe that people will tend to listen to the big news media to listen to read only to big corporate news media such as FOX, for example, BBC, and so on and so forth. And we believe that this is so bad. This is so bad because it is easy. It is going to be easier for those big corporation media to construct the reality. It is so easy for those big corporation media to be abusive towards the power that they have, ladies and gentlemen. So that in the end of the day, there is no room for the clarification. For example, there is no room for the small media to actually disseminate the news because everyone will only listen to the big corporation media. So through that, we are not to.
Next speaker about the ministry.
the important takeaway from that speech is that aould needs to justify why all of these people who are saying purely opinion and not actually reporting the news as it is should be able to brand themselves as news. Because that label has power. Like when I watch the news, it is to get the facts of what is going on. It is not to get someone's opinion about something. Because when this opinion is channeled through news, it appears as fact, right? When someone says this means this and that is good for workers, e.g. the trade war means that China won't be able to send stuff to the US and that is good for workers because we have more factories, it misses out the full idea of that picture and the full impact of that, and the actual impact on workers. But it also presents the idea that that is good for workers as fact, because it is coming from an organisation that is branded as a factual organisation. That is harmful, and that is something which is specifically problematic about the label news and why this is important. I think that they missed 5 points that we gave you about why the news is bad in the status quo, because they said we didn't provide any issues with that. So I'll quickly run over those before going into 4 parts of this speech. Firstly, discriminating people, secondly on the principle, third on echo chambers, and fourthly on the counterfactual and commentary. So firstly, just those harms to the status quo news. Firstly, as I said before, they present opinions as facts, and that is harmful to democracy as presented by Imogen. Secondly, they create a rise in the existence of fake news, and the POI that we had from closing about being existing laws about the shutting down of fake news is obviously not enough because of the existence of fake news in the status quo. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the President of the United States talking about a pure lie of the Ukraine interfering instead of Russia. And obviously, this is something which doesn't properly work because of the propagation of fake news. Thirdly, we brought you that there was trust that was eroded by the existence of opinions being in news and it not being impartial, and that had impacts on democracy as presented to you at Imogen. Fourthly, I'll flesh this out a little bit more. We had the idea of echo chambers and people being shut into specific viewpoints. And fifthly, we had media moments once again presented to you at Imogen. Those harms specifically, so I'm not going to talk about moguls for the rest of the speech because we had very little engagement on it, but firstly, that these moguls feed the preferences of the people who are watching it. Secondly, they increase inequality by specifically promoting policies which benefit them. And thirdly, they have more, that they move the Overdian windows of all news to mean that the policy of that country shifts. So that was specifically the harms we brought you at Imogen. So firstly, a bit of responsive material on discriminated people. They wanted to tell you that this allowing opinions in news meant that more discriminated people would have a voice in the news. But that's just not in touch with reality, because these people are often discriminated by news in the status quo. Note that the status quo is what they are supporting, so that is something where if it doesn't exist, obviously they have missed the mark on that, and that is not something which is going to happen. We think that where these people actually exist are on online spaces and online community forums which are not branded as news, so likely would not fall under this model and would likely still be able to exist. But secondly, I don't see how someone presenting a factual story about their experience of something and then that being contrasted with other views actually breaks this. Like that's probably something which is going to be allowed under this model anyway, so it's probably not relevant to this. Alright, secondly on the principle. They wanted to tell, they kind of pushed a little bit of a sub-principle in the material, saying that we didn't have the right to interfere or regulate non-taxpayer-funded news corporations, and that was promoted by the point of clarification offered by for closing. Notably, I think that you do have the ability to intervene in any private corporation when they have specifically public impact, and news has this public impact because it's something which shapes democracy, shapes education, and therefore we do have the principal right to intervene on it. Alright, thirdly on echo chambers, which is somewhat new material but kind of extends upon Imogen stuff. They wanted to tell you from their POI that defamation, slander, and fake news are already crimes, so why do we need anything more than this? 3 points. Firstly, these, as I said before, these laws don't actually work for fake news. But secondly, the existence of all of these different opinion users creates echo chambers over those specific views. Like someone who is of a right-wing belief only watches right-wing media because it is something which makes them feel good. When they feel that they don't like immigrants, someone telling them that on the news is something which is appealing to them. So they're likely just to lock into those things which confirm all of their biases and promote that echo chamber of all of their problematic beliefs. And the news label legitimizes all of these views. when you take away the ability for that opinion to be pushed through that label, there are probably quite a few people who are right-leaning or left-leaning who would want, who would want news, they want facts, but they want, when they cannot find one that specifically plays into all of their specific, like biases and beliefs or like hatred or like specific things which make them feel good, those biases that they have, then it's quite likely that they will still turn to that news, but they won't get that opinion throughout. So it's likely we get that those views somewhat eroded, which reduces these echo chambers to a far larger degree. So I think that is a huge benefit here, because it is something which means that people are more likely to engage on facts as opposed to weird things that aren't facts. I'll take closing things to Roland.
Yes. So the third sentence of the info slide states that you don't have to be middle on fundamental issues. Who decides what are fundamental issues?
So I think that the fundamental issues would likely be decided over a long period of time by that community, those things which are uncontroversial and believed by everyone. Right? That's how the BBC has done it in the UK. That's why it's rendered on things which are quite a low level in social functioning, things like the justification of democracy or the rule of law. Like they're fairly low functioning at a baseline, and they're the things which are decided on, because it's a long-term thing which probably has like no one in society or maybe one or two people who are against it. I think that it's a very high bar what that reaches. So directly responding to their material about people listening to big corporations here, I think that there is no mechanism for why people would specifically go towards the big corporations in our world, but I also don't see the harm of it happening if they are now being unbiased and they're just presenting factual news. So even if they do go to these, I think that the world that they've painted where these big corporations can shape the media that people are consuming in dangerous ways is very unlikely to happen with these laws here. And then in regards to people being able to consume the diverse political views, which is the conclusion of this point, notably people don't consume diverse news currently, they just consume the thing which makes them feel good. So it is better that we make that something which is trustworthy and not opinion based and is just based on the facts. That's what our model does, and that's what we are trying to propose.
Take a speaker number 2 in the log session.
One extension that I will write you on how we will create a better discussions on political and economic issues and also the check and balance that will happen. And before that, I would like to provide you a rebuttal towards the opening government. They're talking about how opinions are not used and we are not allowed to do that when people are creating fake news and other things like that, and it creates an echo chambers and polarization. So that is the basic argumentations coming from the OG, right? Number one, we think that their mechanism on how we can limit every kind of companies to provide a neutral news cannot change one person's very inherent bias in the very first place, right? They never provide to you on how at the sudden thing, when someone is already leaning to the right wings or when someone is already far left or far right, can suddenly change their mind in the moment they see a very neutral news. So even if that happens, we still think that this kind of mechanism will only happen in a very, very limited way. On how people will only exposed to this kind of news and they will read it, no thank you. They will only read that and they will not change anything in the very first place, right? So we think that their kind of mechanism is not going to happen in the very first place. But number two, even if that there is a very big harms on how people can actually be living can be actually influenced by this fake news, we think that we still already have that regulations regarding to the fake news. We still think that people are educated enough on how they have the intuitive mindset and their intuitive parts to see that discrimination is, for example, not that good enough and other things like that. And number three, on how we think that opinions are actually needed in the very first place in news itself. We think that the moment opinions is actually the stepping stone on how in the border of the host countries that they cannot get in for the refugees, for example. This kind of opinions coming from this certain of people is one stepstone for this case to be exposed to the society, right? But compared to their side, we think that that kind of case will not happen because the media will only portray on the very bare minimum and the general and the first layers of everything. They will only portray a very helicopter views of everything, right? They will not go deeply into one certain case, or they will not go deep into the discrimination case, for example, the women sexual harassment, for example, or they will only portray to you on what is actually happening on the society right away, which we actually do not need anymore, right? Because we think that the power of the media itself is to portray as to be a platform for anyone to have as much as opinions as they could, so we can actually portray it into the society as it is urgent, for example. So moving on to the second point, which is extension, but before that, yes.
People like to think that they're independent. Surely they will always want to seek out news. So once we take the opinion out of the news, they stop consuming these opinions, and therefore we do get that move towards the center of that nice country.
Okay, but even if that happens, ladies and gentlemen, if people stop consuming, for example, like the very right-wing kinds of information and other things like that, we still think that it will not change anything in the very first place, because stopping consuming news doesn't mean that at the end of the day their ideology, their identity is going to change, right? So at the end of the day, what will happen on your side is going to be like, people are not never going to expose, for example, like to the left, very leftist views, for example. People are not going to expose for the campaigns coming from Trump or maybe coming from Hillary's deeply, ladies and gentlemen. They will just be in a bubble when they are already inherently identically actually leaning to one side, which is going to be explained in my extensions on how this can create a better discussion and check and balance. So on their side, ladies and gentlemen, we still think that the moment you have a media which is portraying deeply for example, into the leftist kinds of things and into the right-wing things, it is going to be a better options for people to analyze deeply on which side is much better. Compared to their side, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you are actually stopping this consumptions of these news, people will keep on believing that, for example, I'm a right-wing, that I am going to keep on believing that my identity is right and I will never get exposed to anything else, even though I read news, right? But for example, as what the BBC style model, we still see that this is based on the society's kinds of reflections, right? So we mean that if in one country or if in one area this is dominated by certain religion or certain groups of majority, the news is going to base on what is happening in the society. For example, like they are going to portray to you how good this group of people is, the majority people is, and this minority will never be exposed to these any kinds of platforms. And you are going to only expose these types of information on how the majority people, this group of people are always good and the kind one, and you will always have the mindset that these immigrants are actually those, for example, those bad people and so on and so forth, right? But the moment you have so many news, we still think that this will become a platform, for example, like become the platforms and the chances of the opposition party, for example, to expose about these immigrants, to expose about the other things that have never been exposed by these major reflections of the society, right? So we think that the moment you do this, there is so many platforms and there is so many chances for these immigrants, or for example, for these minorities to come up into the platforms and to be viewed by the other society. So what the marginal benefits that we have provided you? At least, for example, this central white person can also feel that there is a very severe conditions on these immigrants, for example, or they can also feel this central left people can also feel that the campaigns coming from the right wing is not as bad as he knows, for example. So we think that the moment you do not portray this highly, you do not portray this actually deeply, we think that what the portrayal will be is only going to be a majority portrayal coming from the society who have been consumed by the right wing and other things like that. So what will happen on our side is that there is going to be a diversification of news and how people can also be exposed deeply to the analysis of one certain issues. And we think that on their side, they never prove to you on how there is a changes of people giving all people are not biased anymore. So through all those reasons, we are proud to oppose.
I could speak on that for government, which is that kind of space.
We can see from the image they are only talking about which platform or which information they expose on that. But they are neglecting conditions what is news itself. The opposition takes questioning about how this diversity will tackle the conditions of discrimination or something like that. But they are neglecting what is not the news that they should give facts. Even though the news is basically there are not so many news that should be covered, but this fact that the news should be given to us, to the society itself. So basically, we as the procedural government teams believe that we should give the news everything the news that is going to tell as long as that the news is still the facts. And we didn't want the diversity of the news because it only create two sides of people, two sides of the news that create burdens towards the government and the news itself. First clarification about the opposition's belief that the bias affects the country. Yes, we believe the bias affects the country, even if the news is still the news giving fact. Yeah, that's as long as there's the facts, this is news. They're not taking the side. They're not taking the side. They just give the fact that's happening right now, and they didn't say the bad of this side or the good of this side. They are only giving the fact what the society needs right now. It's not the society wants right now. Because society, for example, me as only choose Trump news. I only find the news that is related to the news of Trump, not the related to Trump. So there's in the opposition world, the news only tell good news of Trump or bad news of Trump, and me will choose the good news of Trump, not to choose the news of Trump. So we believe that this is it's okay to be biased the campaign because it is still the fact, and they believe that in the certain areas there will be something that there wouldn't be exposed because there's already the levels of the society in the certain area, but it will be exposed rather than the diversity of the certain stuff because the diversity of the news, perhaps they believe that the news will go directly to expose everything in the news itself. But no, we believe that if the news corporations already picking side, they won't tell the news of the another side itself. So basically, the society wouldn't get the news that they need right now. What's the condition for status quo right now? They didn't get any news itself. So basically, we didn't want that things to be happen because the news is still the news and the fact is given towards the society. So we didn't want to proceed with that. What we want to give an extension in this crossing government, we believe that it will be bad towards the society, and second about the news corporation itself in this condition if we continue to the opposition. First, ideally, the people get the info that they want, get the info that it will be easier to get the news and accurate news. We acknowledge that in a certain democratic country, there is people that have already a good, clear mind that already know what should they get information from each situation. But the neglecting the conditions of certain democratic country that is coming from the developing nations that is worsen if the geographic conditions that need a long time to get the good news or the best news to get the information. We believe that if this condition happen, the news could be divided into two sides, the government side and anti-government side. And it is worse if there is a small news operation that created the hoax by attacking the government side, then the government wouldn't handle this kind of conditions. And why this is bad? Because the people who are on the side, like I said before, they don't want to see another news appears. That is not in line with their beliefs. So basically, the purpose of news will be missed because the news didn't tell all of the facts that they should be given to the society, and the society, the news didn't spread equally towards every people, and every people could be influenced by some people in certain areas that trying to attack government or trying to attack something by giving the news that is speaking side to a certain society, to a certain people or certain company, then it could be bad conditions for the society after that. And society would not get the great conditions towards the news that they should get from it. And second, about the news that the news corporations, we believe that the news corporations is the business corporations. The news needs the money to fulfill their basically needs. And from where the news corporation get money? First, from the advertisements get by people clicking the information from the platform, even though the internet or the newspaper or something like that. And after that, if you diverse this fact that the society didn't trust against towards a certain news, it will create a bad impact for this certain news platforms, because we believe there is only one side. What will happen to this news corporation is only based on which side that this news corporation picks side. For example, if this news corporation is only picks side to the current government organizations, as only a little people seeing the conditions of current government. So there is only a few advertisements coming to this news corporations, and after that this news corporation will be done, and after that this news corporation didn't want to give the conditions of this kind of government information, and they pick another side. So basically, we don't think there is a good taste towards the diversity of the news. The news should give a choice towards everyone. Thank you.
I think that's big enough. I've never done session.
So the opposition will bring two things. The first thing will bring to you is that the compliance on impartiality for news organizations, political exploitation of communities that are most vulnerable and the most that are most cut off from mainstream sources of news. And secondly, I'm going to talk about how this subjects society in general to more state control. So firstly, in terms of, but before that, let us establish the principle of state intervention. When should the state intervene? The state usually intervenes when a particular act or transaction or activity brings objective harm to society without, if that intervention does not exist, if that intervention does not otherwise exist. The biggest harm that government talked about throughout both ventures is the harm of bias. And we say that bias is not an inherent harm or inherent objective harm to society, because firstly, everyone's biased anyway. Even if you're liberal, you're conservative, you're center, you are biased to your own reality, primarily because you base your own viewpoints and your opinions on the realities that you live in, and therefore your biases are also constructed that way. Even if you are an intellectual and you learn of different diverse viewpoints, you will still subscribe subscribe to a certain viewpoint and you will be biased to a certain viewpoint because you are cognitively predisposed to certain realities, right? So therefore, for example, a liberal individual will value free immigration because they have benefited more from free immigration than a working class individual from like globalization, for example. Or for example, a pro-drug legalization person would have benefited more from would benefit more from the use of drugs compared to a family member that had their family ravaged by drug use, for example, right? And we say that the end goal of these different views aren't necessarily bad for society. So, for example, where a country where immigration is restricted might be beneficial in terms of it being able to give more jobs to its locals, for example, or a country where drugs are legal have less black markets. So the conclusion is all different spectrums of viewpoints have a point to bring to discourse and have a point to bring to democracy, right? And we say that these biases are inherently a bad thing and does not warrant the state to intervene in this particular circumstance to impose a condition on news organizations to be partial on these three levels. But secondly, even if you argue that the end goal of a particular viewpoint is a bad thing, having impartial coverage of news will not change anything. Why is this? Primarily because the environment is a stronger factor in the construction of a person's viewpoint compared to the information they consume. Why is this? This is primarily because of two reasons. Firstly, because the environment has a long-lasting effect, and secondly, it has a more comprehensive effect compared to information you consume. You are indoctrinated with the viewpoints that you have from birth, and the only instance where you change your viewpoint are in instances where you include yourself or insert yourself in an entire environment like university, for example, interact with liberal individuals for a lengthened period of time, and only then you develop the bias to be sensitive and to be open and to be proxy to more liberal viewpoints and to more liberal opinions, for example. And this is how people's viewpoints change in general, right? You having a certain coverage of information does not mean that the person will change. Like, if a news organization is impartial on controversial issues, for example, like abortion, for example, a pro-life person will look at both arguments, read the argument on pro-choice, and then go back to the argument on pro-life to reinforce their own viewpoints and to reinforce their own confirmation biases. Therefore, impartial news coverage does not work in terms of changing the opinions of people. What is the harm that they accrue on a net? The harm they accrue is that the imposition of this compliance condition kills the democratic element in society and kills the democratic element in terms of news coverage. Why is this? How? Because of two reasons. Firstly, because of the lack of capacity of numerous private news organizations to comply with the condition of impartiality, and secondly, because the net harm is that it brings greater state control in terms of news coverage. So, firstly, in terms of how compliance kills the democratic element, no thank you. Because a lot of news organizations lack the capacity to comply with the standards of impartiality, the ability to comply to equal news coverage based on the demographic constituents of society is contingent upon the news organization's ability to hire staff, correspondents, to cover different areas, to cover a large geographical area, and to cover them comprehensively and with proper weightage. The second structure that they need to do is a constant revenue stream in order for them to constantly deliver news and expand their ability to deliver comprehensive news. What does this mean for numerous news organizations, like private news organizations that are especially community-based? So all these news organizations cater to certain target markets within their own community and specific communities. So for example, in rural areas, the news coverage is more on agricultural policy or the trade policy of the government with regards to agricultural goods, right? And if the community stops receiving this flow of information, primarily because a community-based news organization is forced to provide equal weightage to all areas of society and all issues in society, they will not receive this information. Therefore, it is less likely that they will continue to pay to subscribe to these community-based news organizations and just resort to a free alternative, which is BBC, because it's almost the same thing, right? But yeah, so what does this mean for these individuals? Firstly, it means that you kill the news organization's revenue stream. But secondly, for the people on the ground in these communities, you severely restrict the dissemination of information that is relevant to the core values and the nuanced problems and situations of these communities. And this is inherently undemocratic, primarily because the liberal agenda is not the absolute good in society. What is the absolute good is the representation of the core values in the democratic process, and that is how you include people, that is how you are more inclusive to individuals, right? And it's also undemocratic because you don't allow for people to be informed about issues that affect them. How does this lead to political individuals and communities do not access these community-based news organizations, and their only alternative is like BBC, for example, this means that they are more subject to politician propaganda as a source of information about their community. Because all they can get is a general news coverage on all news platforms. The only source of nuanced information is through political campaigns that feed propaganda about, oh, these are the nuanced problems that your community is facing that the news isn't giving out to you. So that is how exploitation increases. Lastly, in terms of state control, because the last condition is that you cannot critique rule of law and the legitimacy of democratic process. The news organizations need to critique it because the arbiter of rule of law is the state, and news sites are unable to critique constitutionality, for example, in America, like the amendment on gun law, for example, or they are unable to critique bad democratic processes like proroguing in the UK Parliament, for example, because a lot of bad democratic processes are deemed legitimate even in the best of democracies. You need news organizations to be brave enough to do it, and the organizations that are brave enough to do this are your small, brave news corporations that are the loudest. For all those reasons, I'm extremely proud to oppose.
Second speaker number, Gabut, please come back.
I'd like to start my speech with this never clarification points towards what the debate is going on. Because in this debate, from what the opening benches and also the opening opposition, closing opposition talking about is basically that impartiality means not critical towards the government, of course, in the other parties. But we say that it's different. The impartial in this debate basically means that we are not siding with one party, but it doesn't mean that it restricts us on criticizing one party. Because basically, as long as you're impartial, it means that you're criticizing every other party. It means that it's impartial. But unless you're only criticizing, for example, Trump and not Hillary Clinton, that is what we call impartial in this debate. So that's why we have to clarify that basically no critics doesn't mean, impartiality doesn't equal no critics at all for the government or any other party. Several responses I would like to give to the opposition. Basically, the opposition is supporting the idea of diversity in this debate, that basically people need to be heard, that basically there are so many minorities in this debate that cannot be heard because the news only sided with one thing. But exactly why impartiality is needed in here. Why is it important? Because when the media solely focus on one thing, or for example, only one party or for one actor only, it means that the minority will not be covered. But they argue that the minority, with the diversity of the news, can speak up so that people can hear that. We say that it is the otherwise, because why? With the diversity, it means that the majority will still win either way, because the majority will still control the population. But in other side of the house, the impartiality ensure that every minority, even the minority, would be heard. But even if that is not being heard, it means that the greater it means that we're supporting the majority because the majority, again, maybe is more important than the minority. We do not say that the minority is not important physically, but at least at the very least, under our side of the house, that everybody will have the equal chance, and even if they don't have the equal chance, that the majority will still enjoy what they're supposed to have. So that's why we think that is important. But the next thing is that basically that the government that basically can only have bare minimum news under our side of the house. We say that it is the otherwise. Why? Because the function of news is the main question that hasn't been answered. There is a debate. What is the main function of the news itself? Basically, the main function of the news is to tell people what is exactly going on in the world, and that's exactly why it's important. If the opposition argue that yes, environment is more important than news because people are more exposed to the environment, because people live longer in the environment, we have to realize that in this era where people do not socialize more, they socialize more with the internet, they socialize more with cell phone, so on and so forth, it means that people are less exposed to the community or to the environment that they have. Even though they're in the same university, for example, in this assumption, for example, it doesn't mean that they would have to support one party or one ideology because people have different ideologies. Exactly what impartiality means, that it will cover every needs of every actor in this debate, because basically it means that people can get what they want. And we do not say that as different ideology is bad. We do not say that. Basically, what we are trying to protect here is that it's okay for you to have different ideology, and we're supporting you with all the data, all the the information that you need. So it's not only for one actor, but for everyone. It's up to you to decide which side or which ideology that you would like to use in this debate. So that's why it is very important. And basically, that news have segmentation, and that's what kill revenues if we blindly do the impartiality towards every news. But exactly why we need to do the impartiality? Because news have segmentation or market share in this debate. It means that one news agency can focus more on what they want to do. For example, in agriculture, or for example, in fisheries, and so on and so forth. It means that with the impartiality, that it creates more, it creates more of a field for them to explore what they want to do, because they would know that, oh, this one's going to be talking about this, and this is going to be true, and that we can focus on that more. So that means that it will not cover abuse. Instead, it will help them to find the segmentation. Because what we see in here, the homogeneous, so status quo in this debate is that basically there are so many news agencies, and that basically they have all different perspectives on that. And we say that this is very harmful. Why? Because when we have so many different news agencies, and there are so many voices, so many opinions, and people do not know what to do. Think about it this way. If you are in the developing countries where your information is very limited, or like basically your education level is not that high compared to any other advanced country, it means that the news is like the sole source of information that they will learn later. So it means that in developing countries, this would very help them, because impartiality means that they would know that what they need to know. But even if it's not only in the developing country, in developed country, for example, it still needs to be employed or enforced. Why? Because basically news need to serve the fact, and that every news agency relies on the fact only, because trust is the main point of any news agency. If the news agency has lost their support from the people because people don't trust them, that will kill the revenue. That's exactly why the diversity in here would not happen at all, because the homogeneous means that there would not be any successful news agency, because why? They all have different perspectives, and people will always be separated. But at least on the other side of the house, with the segmentation of the news, it means that every news agency will have their own segmentation. It means that not the revenue, it means that will help them to boost their sales and to boost their operation, because people know where to find the news. But under the side of the house, basically diversity is like universal thing. So every news is the same, every news can cover everything, and that's why that would harm the actor in this case is the news agency itself. But let's do the comparative in this debate. So why is it better under the side of the house, and why is it going to be worse under the side of the house? Basically, when we're talking about news, it needs to be impartial, again, and impartial means that people can know what they want to do. Now, we do not say that people are not smart, but we say that people are very friendly in this debate, because people basically only know what they're being spoon-fed of, and that is the news. And that's without impartiality, it means that news can create disputes on the information that would create the perspective or the minds of the people changes, and that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. We acknowledge the diversity of the people, the ideology of it, but we do not agree with the way media shift them into, because right now the media shift them into what they want, but it's not the real thing that any individual or any society or any people, any person wants to have. So that's exactly why the diversity in here, basically they want to cover the harm that exists in this debate, that people are exposed into lots of things, and that people are forced to believe in actually one thing, but they want to cover it up by saying that this is diversity, so basically we are not harming you, we want to show you the best. But understand us, because it's impartial, people can always trust that it is impartial. It means that, oh, it's not going to harm me at any cost at all. So that means I can trust these teams better. That's why we are proud co-hosts.
Speaker by the opposition to conclude the debate.
So I'll be very simple. Let's just talk about CG, OG, then OO. CG first. I think broadly, CG contributed three things in the debate. The first is that segmentation will likely occur in their side. The second is that media can shape individuals, and the third is that individuals get to choose their ideologies, and that's a benefit. For three reasons, I think they are very simple responses. The first one to the idea of segmentation. The only reason why corporations like BBC can successfully comply with regulations is because they are funded heavily by the state through taxpayer money. I think it's incredibly difficult if you are, even if you are the Murdoch press, like what would you want to tell you, if you provide similar information like BBC, which is impartial news, I don't see why they will continue to operate and have the ability to segment themselves to certain parts of communities, given the fact that BBC is free and individuals need to pay for corporations that write word by word for corporation that is free. So it's most likely what you're going to get is a monopoly of one corporation that gets to control how news is portrayed under the veil of impartiality and being controlled by the state. So I don't see why there's an analysis coming from closing government why the segmentation is likely to occur. Second is on this argument about if you get to choose your ideologies. That's exactly what we are telling you, that we have no problem with you choosing your ideologies, because all ideologies are valid viewpoints and are free to happen. That happens better under our side because you have diversified, personalized news corporations that are able to be accessed by individuals who can either pay for them or access because they continue to cover their issues. As opposed to you locking them out and providing the same number of information, I don't see how you get to choose that ideology, especially given, I'll take you in a minute, especially given the analysis that Sharon already told you, that you choose your ideology based on your environment as opposed to based on the news that you consume when you're able to read when you're what, 12 or 13. And that also responds to the idea that media can shape them. Let's talk about OG. So, before that, sure.
People can make and spread their own opinions in non-news forums or threads. Why should opinions be dictated to people and labeled as news?
Opinions aren't dictated and labeled as news. News is where, right now in status quo, facts are displayed and then the facts are utilized to justify a certain opinion or a political lineage. I don't see why that's a problem, given the fact that it's a right to access that expression. I still don't see the harm that you're trying to bring, because like what Sharon told you, the outcome that OG brings to you is simply bias. Does it justify that state intervention on that principle of expression, or your ability to access that freedom of expression? Is still an answer, is still a question they have yet to answer. So on a comparative, we think that that principle is more important than this opinion, Facebook, whatever. And if you buy that analysis, then all the arguments about breaking echo chambers, about making people elevate themselves and being smart will also not occur, because people will just go to Facebook opinion posts and the same problem will continue to cycle all day long. So, yeah. OG contributed two broad things. So I'll take you one again later. The first is that news is oftentimes opinionated and there's misinformation and there's a lot of fake news. I think we have to analyze if this is true or not. The first is there's enough regulation to protect what it means to be true. So things like defamation, slander, or information that is untrue, even if it is has to be checked again if there's problem. Secondly, the problems like Hillary's emails or Hillary is a liar isn't necessarily false, because to certain news corporations there are instances where she has lied. There are instances where the emails contain that information that were particularly important. That is why it was never even fought by this individual in the first place. So on this idea of where news don't portray objective truth is also an assumption that they conveniently take. Second, on this idea of fake news, individuals who portray things like fake news are just an agenda by either side of the spectrum, because they don't believe in the opinions that are forwarded based on the facts. That is why you see individuals from the right claiming that CNN is fake news when they don't even read CNN. That is why you see individuals on the left claim that Fox is fake even though they don't access Fox news in the first place. So even if this is by itself an opinion by individuals, just because individuals have an uninformed opinion, why should we consider the fact that it is fake and therefore state needs to intervene and make it impartial? That is on the first premise. The second premise that they operate on is you get policy change, you remove inequality, and you break echo chambers. This is contingent on two premises. The first is that these ideas are formed, your political leanings and biases and echo chambers are formed due to the news. And the second premise is that they can change once news become impartial. How did our extension uniquely deal with that? The first is, we told you that your political leanings and biases are not necessarily linked to you absorbing the news. They give you no analysis from OG or CG to tell you how news and media shapes you as an individual as compared to Sharon's analysis as to how interacting with your environment from religion, culture, tradition, and family members up to a certain point creates that identity and decides what political leaning that you want to be. That is why if I'm an average person who comes from a conservative family, a Christian family in Texas, for example, example, when I become old enough to read, most likely I'm going to access Fox News. It's not the other way around where I read Fox News and then, oh my god, echo chambers. At best, it complements the echo chamber. It doesn't validate, it doesn't confirm, it doesn't create. Doesn't create. This only means that that first premise about why people create these echo chambers and policy change is unlikely to be true. Second, on the fact that they can change through this news change. Also, another link that I don't think so they managed to prove. It's convenient and logical to assume that if you vacuum the media, people will not have access. But that is not true based on two reasons. The first is, like they told you, you have access to Facebook opinion ads. But secondly, and more importantly, is the fact that you as a person, if you have access to only facts, you make that link by yourself. That is why if Trump says we need to strengthen immigration laws, CNN and Fox News will have the same heading. But if I'm from the left, I will interpret that as him being providing human rights abuse. But if I'm a worker in El Paso who just got my job taken away by a Mexican who is being offered lower wages, I'm going to come to the conclusion that he is right, that he is focusing on my problems. So this has no opinion whatsoever. It is a fact stated by the President of the United States, but can lead to two entirely different outcomes. That is to say, you cannot change the world coming from open opposition. That is why the benefit that Sharif provided in his extension about personalized news, about protecting the freedom of expression, is the comparative that is not worth taking off this debate. For that reason, Brad Trump